Hello, my name is Adam, and today I'm going to be discussing how Pakistan compares with the US, India, and Iran economically. Just as a heads up, this topic is very heavy with statistics, charts, and comparisons, but I've done my best to make it visually appealing. I hope that after this presentation you may better understand how Pakistan, India, Iran, and the US compare for size in an economic standpoint. When we look at the world map, we can automatically spot some differences in the countries. Most commonly noticed differences are the landmass and location. The US is located on the western hemisphere, while Iran, Pakistan, and India are all located nearby in the eastern hemisphere. The US is clearly larger in size than the others, which we will discuss more in depth in future slides. To start off, I thought it would be ideal to show the completed chart with the exact numbers of the data for your own reference if you prefer to read the numbers instead of look at graphs. So, I've placed it here on the screen. But I will be going through each of these statistics individually, more in depth, in the slides to come. During this presentation, I'm not going to be reading aloud each individual statistic, but I'll be pointing out the most significant differences and the priority observations that can be made. The population of a country is important because the amount of people inhabiting can directly influence the economics of a country. The more people there are, the more potential for productivity, but it also costs more to provide for the citizens. The amount of area within a country can also directly influence its economy, because it can provide resources, allow room for building and expansions, along with providing potential for production, thus influencing economics as well. As we can see from these graphs, India clearly has a massive lead in population, more than 5 times as much as Pakistan, and the US has nearly 13 times the landmass, but half the population as Pakistan. When we combine these two graphs, we get a visual for how much land is available per person in the country. In other words, we get to see how densely packed the population is on average. The graph shows that India is more densely populated, with over 1,000 people living in each square mile. Pakistan is also more densely populated in comparison to the US and Iran. This can contribute to overcrowding, uneven distribution of resources, and more competition over the available valuable resources on the land. This graph visualizes the differences of unemployment rates in our compared countries. For a refresher, the unemployment rate is the percentage of citizens who are looking to work but have been unable to find it and are not employed for the time being. This unemployment rate can be used to help describe the economic state of the country. Generally speaking, a higher unemployment rate is correlated with more economic hardships, as businesses cannot afford to hire more staff. Looking at the graph, we can see that Pakistan has a healthy unemployment rate similar to the US. A low unemployment rate with a few percent is usually good because it provides businesses people that they can hire as staff. Gross domestic product is a monetary measure of the market value of all goods and services provided in a year. In other words, it is the amount of money that a country earns within a year, therefore partially representing a country's economic/buying power. In this graph representing GDP, we can see that the US has about 19 times more GDP than Pakistan, with Pakistan having the lowest GDP out of all 4 countries. This shows that Pakistan as a whole has less income, so to speak. The GDP growth rate tells you how fast a country's economy is growing. It compares the GDP from one time frame to another, usually from quarter to quarter within a year. Pakistan appears to have a healthy growth rate of 4.2%, nearly doubling the United States' economic growth, but still quite behind India's economic growth. Overall, the best measurement to compare a country's standard of living is the GDP per capita. In case you are unfamiliar with the GDP per capita, it is a measurement of a country's economic output that accounts for its number of people. It divides the country's gross domestic product by its total population, making it the best measurement of a country's standard of living. A country's standard of living is directly influenced by its economics, making GDP per capita the best way to compare and measure a country's economics. Here on the screen exemplifies the importance of GDP per capita. You'll notice that India's GDP was about half of the United States, but when population is taken into account, the GDP per capita is significantly lower in comparison because India has such a higher population. In conclusion, Pakistan has the smallest economy in comparison to these other countries. We can confirm that because it has a smaller GDP and GDP per capita. Although its economy appears to be growing at a steady pace, it might never become as large economically as Iran, India, or the US, but only time will tell. Thank you for listening, and if you have any questions, feel free to drop them on the discussion board.